Excellent. Valerie, the floor is yours.
All right, great. Good morning, and thank you, Ibrahima. Good morning to everyone for joining. We are incredibly excited to have you here for our webinar, Pathways to Opportunity. I am Valerie White, Executive Director of LISC New York City. LISC, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, is a national nonprofit, and we've been around for about 40 years. And basically, we invest in underinvested communities and equip them with capital strategy, technical assistance, and capacity building to ensure that we are bringing to equity the places where low and moderate income Americans can thrive. At LISC New York City, we are the flagship office, the local office, and we support our partners whose services and programs create a more equitable, inclusive, and sustainable New York City. And everything we do is covered in the concept of racial and economic equity. Beginning in April 2020, our investment strategy has been very strategically and deliberately guided by 3 pillars. The first is radical healing, and that counters racial biases, inequities through community safety, creative placemaking, and other arts and cultural initiatives. The second pillar is inclusive economic transformation, and through that we prioritize human talent, community health, diverse enterprises, innovation, and public infrastructure development. And the third pillar is sustainable wealth generation in communities of color, including through ownership, asset building, career ladder, and program growth. We believe at this time that it's important to forge a future for New York City that eradicates the wealth gap for goods and protects affordable housing for low and moderate income New Yorkers, as well as some building pathways of meaningful economic opportunities for everyone. And these goals are particularly urgent to us and to New York in light of the current COVID pandemic and the economic downturn that has disproportionately impacted the livelihoods and financial security of New Yorkers of color. So it is particularly critical that we are working to close the racial wealth gap, and are very proud and pleased to be partnering with New York City's Department of Housing and Preservation Development, Goldman Sachs, Enterprise Community Partners to carry out the Pathways to Opportunity. Now, this is a 2-phase initiative that invests in MWBEs and nonprofits that want to capitalize on growing affordable housing industry that is happening in New York. We believe that not only if this is the right thing to do, this is the thing to do. It will work toward eradicating systemic inequities by ensuring that we are building strength, building capacity of our mission-driven partners, but also ensuring equitable access to affordable housing for all New Yorkers, as well as equitable access to businesses that are owned and run by minority enterprise owners. We're very grateful to Goldman Sachs for providing the generous $100,000 grant for the first phase of this program, which aims to increase the supply of MWBEs and nonprofits to qualify to serve as marketing agents by preparing them to apply for HPD's recently released qualified marketing agent request for qualifications disbursement. The second phase, which is going to be led by Enterprise Community Partners, aims to create affordable housing marketing career pathways for low wealth New Yorkers, particularly those who are currently living in affordable housing through a workforce development program. We are very excited about making this resource and training available and providing a means to have practical solutions to moving forward and strengthening the affordable housing sector and lead to more access and better outcomes for New Yorkers seeking affordable housing. During the webinar today, you will hear from panelists with deep professional experience in affordable housing and marketing. These panelists will also share their perspective on key elements of a successful marketing agent business, including bidding, staffing, technology, and working with clients. Before I end my remarks, I want to make a request of minority-owned businesses in the audience. Currently, LISC New York City is conducting a survey of minority-owned businesses to uncover the economic impact that the pandemic and economic crisis has had on small businesses like yours. We would appreciate your assistance in completing our survey, as it will help us advocate for policies that will help your businesses recover. Ibrahim Asware will provide the link in the chat box shortly. It's also on our website, but we please ask that you fill this out, because that information will be invaluable as we continue to grow our program, our advocacy to help rebuild the opportunities for small businesses in New York City as we go through COVID and beyond. So with that, I will bid you all adieu. Have a wonderful training session. I hope you will find it informative. And I'd like to turn it over to Eva Allagood, who is LISC New York City's Deputy Director. Eva?
Thank you very much, Valerie. Thanks for that. And I also want to welcome everyone today and thank all our partners, and also mention, in addition to the partners that Valerie listed, that our LISC's affiliate National Equity Fund is a major partner and player here today and with this initiative. And you'll be hearing from Lisa Deller, Vice President of Asset Management, who is one of our moderators. I wanted to acknowledge that role. So with that, I just want to add a bit more context to this initiative that Valerie laid out and explained how it's part of this overall mission of overcoming the racial wealth gap. So some of the background on the training resources we're providing here is that we're targeting, as she said, MWBEs and nonprofits who are interested in submitting a response to HPD's request for qualifications for marketing agents. And I wanted to remind everyone, most people probably know that the due date for the upcoming RFQ is April 9th. But rest assured that is not your only opportunity. If you need more time to put all your materials together, there will be applications accepted on a rolling basis after that date. That first date is really to get the initial list of qualified marketing agents vetted and available to work on projects as soon as possible. Through the request for qualifications that the city has put out, they're going to establish this pre-qualified list of marketing agents who are eligible to work on city-sponsored housing projects. And I just want to emphasize that the city is looking to increase the number of qualified firms to perform marketing activities such as advertising, unit lease-up, sale, tenant eligibility review, and ongoing compliance. And there are a growing number of affordable housing projects in the pipeline, and they will be marketed through the Housing Connect lottery process. So this is all about creating opportunities for these firms to be part of that very important work. So back in February, HPD had an open call for applications from firms who were interested in receiving free training and certification on topics that are required as part of this qualification review. And those topics are the HPD Marketing and Housing Connect training, low-income housing tax credit compliance, and fair housing. So last month, a committee made up of representatives from HPD, LISC New York City, and Enterprise Community Partners selected the initial cohort of MWBEs and nonprofits for the program. And we're very pleased to let you all know that 18 firms were accepted into the program and started their training last week with our winter series, which kicked off with low-income housing tax credit compliance. If you were not part of this first cohort, we're happy to let you know that there will be another 2 rounds of free training series, which you need to apply for. The spring series will take place in May and June, and the fall series will take place in September and October. So to apply, please visit HPD's website at the link that Ibrahim Asware will put into the chat box. And so those are all the background items that I wanted to share with you all. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to our two moderators who are going to be speaking to our panelists this morning, Lisa Deller, who I mentioned is the Vice President of Asset Management at the National Equity Fund, and Margie Brown, who's Associate Commissioner of New York City's Department of Housing Preservation and Development. So thank you, Lisa and Margie. We're really excited to hear from this panel of experts.
Always helps to unmute yourself. Thank you, Eva. So when we first started preparing to raise the money for the marketing training, we did surveys with many organizations in New York City around marketing. We asked questions about, how you work with clients and bidding, and was it worth your while, and did you do for yourself or did you do for others? And I have to say, in the 20 plus years that I've worked at NEF, working with our partners, our sponsor partners, I learned more than I had ever in the past about what it means to be a marketing agent with Housing Connect. And so I am really excited today to have a great panel with us. Margie Brown from HPD is my co-moderator. Nicholas Lindsay Jones is the Chief Commercial Officer for Cornell Pace, which is a property management firm that does a lot of property management of LIHTC and other kinds of apartment communities in New York. Kathy Hecht, who is the VP of Marketing for Phipps Houses, and Sharon Smith, who is the Managing Partner and CEO with Spring Leasing and Management Company. All of these professionals who are with us today are seasoned and successful and have been doing this for a number of years. They have battle scars to prove it. And what we wanted to do today is really to share with everyone who is already in the training program or who is thinking about joining, the number of marketing agent firms for HPD, and to share the lessons learned about marketing, Housing Connect, working in this field, and really what it takes to have excellence in this business. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Margie a little bit to talk about Housing Connect, what it means to be a marketing agent for HPD, and then we'll move along and talk to our panel of marketing agents.
Thank you, Lisa. And thanks so much to everyone for joining us this morning. We're really excited about this presentation and about the Pathways to Opportunity program. As others have touched on, this program really hits on two key initiatives for the agency, one of which is the Housing Connect lotteries and making sure that our housing is made available through an open, transparent, fair, accessible process. And the other one is to attract and support NWBEs to HPD's work. And we feel like this is a really key area of work for the agency. Over the past several years, the amount of units going through lottery and the amount of Housing Connect work has really just grown exponentially. We are now doing over triple the number of units per year that we were just a few years ago, and we see that quadrupling very quickly. And so just the volume of lotteries and the volume of units is just really so much greater than it has been before. And that is both a reflection of the increased production, the increased development units being put out, both in our new construction and our preservation programs, And also that we as an agency have tried to make sure that all of the units that are available through our programs really are going through the fair process of the Housing Connect lottery. I had touched on that Housing Connect really is geared toward making lotteries open, fair, accessible, and transparent. And all of those things are really baked into the guidelines that we put out through marketing, as well as the Housing Connect system. As many of you are probably aware, we just released a new Housing Connect system, which is really much more of an end-to-end system from the applicant's perspective when somebody thinks, I need to search for affordable housing, to the time that they get into a unit. And from the marketing agents or developers' perspective, from the time that they have a unit that is close to complete in construction to the time that it is successfully leased and in compliance with the tax credit guidelines, fair housing guidelines, and all of the other rules and regulations that govern affordable housing. As you can see, both of these things, both the lottery process and the Pathways to Opportunity program to support MWBEs really are geared toward equity, making sure that we have equity in terms of who gets into our housing and equity in terms of who is doing the business of putting this housing out. So we're so excited to be able to have all of you here to hear what it is to be a marketing agent and to do this work. And to really be able to have the training program to support you to get there. Today, the training program really is about content knowledge, training in tax credit compliance, training in fair housing, training directly in the lottery process, what it means to do a lottery. We're really excited about this panel because the business of being a marketing agent and being able to do that successfully is also very important. And there's nobody better to speak to that than people already in this business. So thank you to our presenters for joining us to share some of that insight.
Thank you, Margie. Yeah, being a marketing agent is not for the faint of heart. So with that, I want to turn it over to our presenters because it's certainly not about all of us, but it's about you and how this business works in the field. So I'd like to turn it over to our panelists and to introduce themselves, talk about their years in the business, what brought them to the business, and their experience. So Nicholas, can I start with you?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. I came to the business in a slightly circuitous route. My training is actually as a special education teacher. So in a former life, I was a New York City special education teacher with a focus on math. And one of the things that really consistently struck me when I was teaching was how difficult it was for my students who were homeless. Not having a stable home environment is very, very difficult on a child's success. So the importance of housing sort of kept coming back up, and I transitioned actually out of teaching into affordable housing about 12 or 13 years ago. And with my math background, one of the things, as the Housing Connect lotteries became larger and larger, the number of data points, so what ends up happening is tens of thousands of people apply for the units. So trying to manage all of the information, manage all of the applicants, is where I kind of stepped in and tried to put, some data analytics to that process. And our main focus is really tax credit deals.
Thanks, Nicholas. Sharon, would you go next? Thank you. No, we have to unmute yourself or we can't hear you. No, we can't hear you.
Okay.
Now we can. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. I'll start over. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. particularly giving what the mission, is about in terms of finding marketing agents who are up to the task of doing this very, very critical, important work. I always say that you have to build the buildings, you have to put the financing together, but if you don't put people in the buildings, then it's all for nothing. So the role that we play is very, very critical, even though it's at the end of the process. I've been in housing for quite a few decades. I remember before there was no Housing Connect, much less a Housing Connect 2. Everything was done through random selection in a room. We still do some parts of that, of course, and putting everything on a spreadsheet manually, and working the lotteries from that standpoint. So the housing industry, particularly from the city's perspective, has come a really long way in building in an infrastructure and technology to allow the transparency that Margie just talked about in the process. So I started in real estate right after college. I worked for Related Management of New York for several years in the corporate offices, handling all kinds of aspects of real estate management, particularly compliance. I was a HUD compliance trainer for the majority of the company. And then from there, I went on to work for the National Development Council, which is a non-for-profit equity investment and economic development firm in New York City that really sought to do the things that LISC is doing in terms of bringing communities into the 21st century with housing opportunities and economic development opportunities as well. And so I think from being at NBC, I developed a passion for being a part of the housing stability process, helping families to make sure they have a stable home, that they're not in crisis, at least when it comes to where they lay their head. And that's just continued over the years. I've been on to become the president of the Arca Company's Progressive Management and Leasing Company for 10 years prior to starting Spring. And I just love what I do. And that's, I think, a very critical piece of the puzzle here, is that you really have to love and enjoy. I have a passion for what you do. So that's sort of my story.
I almost forgot about the mailbags.
Exactly.
It's not been that long, but I do remember these like huge bags of mail coming into the office and having to sort through paper. Yep. Yeah, this is a huge improvement over mailbags, I have to say. So Kathy, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. But speaking of the mailbags, I remember we would have to hire 20, 25 temps just to open the mail, staple the envelope to the application, and hand write the logs. So even though you're going to think now, as we do our lotteries, it's very labor intensive, nothing compared to what it used to be. This really is an improvement. It really, really is. So my background, I went to law school really for the sole purpose of working on public policy issues in New York City. And my job out of law school was at HPD as director of tax incentives. And not to date myself, because this was a long time ago. I was a small child at the time. I had the opportunity to really work on two programs that we talk about all day long, which were in its infancy, which was inclusionary housing and the affordable housing component of 421A. At that time, prior to my arrival at HPD, 421A had been a citywide tax exemption program where you built a new building, you got a tax exemption. And at that point, people said, south of 96th Street, why do you need this tax exemption? You need to give something back in return. And that was the genesis of the programs that we have now. At that time, it was strictly an 80-20 program, but it was also an option where you didn't have to do it on site. And in fact, most people did it off site as what was known as a certificate program. People would build affordable housing somewhere else in the city, get certificates for it, and they would actually sell that benefit for those units to other developers who were building a building. So when I was there, we had one developer who built a massive affordable housing complex in Spring Creek near Starrett City in Brooklyn. I forgot how many units, but it might have been even 1,000 units. For years, that developer was selling those certificates to developers in Manhattan who wanted their benefit. Things changed, the world changed, the world learned different things, learned that you could actually require that affordable housing within the building. It would help to integrate a neighborhood, bring economic diversity to a neighborhood, and that program evolved. The certificate program is, of course, no longer. And so I really had that opportunity to help write the regulations for those two programs. So it was really very exciting to be at the beginning of something new. I left HPD mostly because I moved 10 miles west of the city into New Jersey, and I couldn't work for HPD anymore. So I worked on some transportation policy programs at the MTA, a few other things. And about 10 years ago, I was looking to get back into affordable housing. And lo and behold, Settlement Housing Fund, and I see my colleague Mildred Flores is on this call. Settlement Housing Fund hired me to be their director of marketing and compliance, which was overseeing housing lotteries. Again, I started there with the big black garbage bags, dumping the paper on the floor. I did that for many years. Then I went out on my own as a consultant in the field, briefly at Related, working on compliance issues and some special projects in and around the LIHTC compliance world. And this past November, I joined PHIPS, which I guess is one of the largest and oldest not-for-profit housing providers in the city. And I joined them as VP for Affordable Housing Marketing, overseeing the lotteries. So I'm very excited to be here with everybody else and also learning from my panelists and being part of this great program.
Thank you, Kathy. So, we see from the background of our presenters that people come to affordable housing marketing from many different backgrounds, from education, from property management, from policy. We all get here from, we get here from somewhere, but a lot of people, once you get here, I can see everyone on this panel stayed. And, everyone on this panel has been here for more than, 20 years, working in the trenches in property management, affordable housing, leasing and marketing, policy, myself included. And so, it really captures you in a way that is really compelling. And we'll talk more about that, seeing the satisfaction of households when they get their apartments is really something that, is not only sobering, but really fulfilling in many, many ways. So we want to turn now to the business of marketing. And so we're going to again speak to the different panelists about, what is your business? Who are your clients? What are your relationships with developers and clients, and how do you do what you do? So let's start with Sharon and talk about kind of what is your business, who are your clients, and what's that relationship like?
Sure. So Spring Leasing and Management was formed in 2019, after, decades, as we just discussed, in the business. And, I started the company, with the idea that I would, consult for developers or even for management companies or non-for-profits that need some assistance technically in how to manage their business. And quickly it morphed into Spring actually being that marketing agent and using all of the expertise that I had gained over, the past, of my career. I didn't really elaborate, but prior to starting Spring, I had been with the Arca companies, and in that time we had leased up probably about 3,000 units of out of the ground construction. So that was countless lotteries, countless placements of families, homeless families from the lotteries into their new homes. And so I certainly had the experience and expertise to do it. And I really wanted to expand on that. So Spring is a full service leasing company along with a management company. We also just recently added a social service component, to our services so that we can, do our best to ensure that residents who come into our properties do not leave and go, become evicted or return to the shelter system. So we've added a social service director who is there to offer assistance and, different resources and referrals to ensure that families stay housed. But we are a boutique. We're very hands-on. We like to think of ourselves as an extension of a developer's office. Developers tend to stand alone and work with a lot of professional entities, be the architects or the banks or the agencies. But when it comes to the leasing and the marketing side, they're kind of just, not out of touch with that. So we try our best to keep a very clear line of communication, with our developers, be very transparent as to the process, the timelines, the expectations that are really critical to a successful lease-up process. Currently, we have we're currently leasing 235 units in Brooklyn, which is an Ella and MIH deal for HPD HDC for a developer that has several properties already. We also are in pre-marketing phase for 2 additional properties. One is 326 units in the Bronx of 3 buildings, also MIH, Lytech, 60% units. And also there's another property in Brooklyn that we're doing pre-marketing for that is about 118 units, also MIH and Lytech. And so what we've learned is it's really critical to have realistic expectations when you're working with your clients, with your developers. You want to build meaningful relationships, that really is based on not overpromising, but being realistic and being pragmatic about the overall process. So I think that's really about it for now.
Yeah. Do you work, do you have a specialty? Do you like to work on tax credit projects or 421A or would you work on kind of anything?
As it comes, right?
As it comes, right?
As it comes. You're always seeking business. And so, we have developed a skill set, with my team. I was able and fortunate to bring on board several professionals that I had worked with in the past that I had groomed actually over my years in the business that joined Spring with a lot of faith that we would be successful, in this space. And so we have the capacity as a company to handle Lytech, 421A projects, MIH, whatever it may be that requires eligibility of applicants and files, we're able to do it. So we really just take the business as it comes.
Yeah, I just would add that, we see in this field that people move around a lot. People on the ground, people who have specialty in compliance, there's something about that skill set that is invaluable when you get good at it. So for people who are in this training program and who are aiming to be a qualified firm, even if you're at the beginning of that journey, having this level of knowledge in low-income housing tax credits and marketing is really a desirable skill in New York City at this moment. So, I just want to add that. And Nicholas, how about you? Talk about your business and kind of what you specialize in. And, I know as a property management firm, you're managing for your clients. So it's different than Sharon's model where she's working for developers who manage their own properties, or she's not a property management company. So are you a property management company? I apologize.
Sharon's doing it all. I love it.
We're doing it all. We focus on leasing for this, conversation. Nicholas will definitely elaborate on the importance of management contracts, but we do it all as well.
Okay, great. I'm sorry.
We do, if they want us to do management and leasing, we do them both. If not, we'll just do the leasing.
Thank you. Nicholas, talk about working for a large management company and doing marketing that way.
Yeah, so we typically do not just do lease up. I think the economics, and we're going to go into this a little bit later, of leasing and management as a whole, it's a very personnel and staff heavy model. So the margins are not necessarily, that high. So a lot of it becomes an economy of scale model. So for us, one of the things that we try to focus on is really just tax credit deals. And specifically, one of the most important questions that I ask developers if they come to us is if it's 100% affordable, and if it's not, is it going to be condoed? Because the ongoing compliance for any company out there who is looking to not only create a marketing firm, but an ongoing management company, is the ongoing compliance is just as vital, maybe to the developer at that moment when they're looking to deliver their credits and close their construction loan. It's not as vital, but from a staffing perspective and ensuring that you're going to be able to continue to provide the service that you're agreeing to is very important. So, one thing that it's hard to do, but we do, is actually sometimes saying no, and being able to realistically, and Sharon touched on this, make sure that you're not over-promising, that you're writing a check you really can cash, because one of the things in this business, like many business, is it takes a long time to build a reputation, but it can be lost very, very quickly. We have large developers who we work for, and we have small developers who we work for. And sometimes when, someone may come and approach us and that they're looking for work, one of the first calls that I may make is actually to our large developer and say, what do you have in the pipeline? And if they have something in the pipeline that may, in the Venn diagram of lease up, have too much overlap, and I think there may be a capacity issue, that we often will actually say no to that business. But I think one of the things that's really great about this entire initiative is there is a lot of need for marketing agents. And it's not unusual. I don't think anyone on this call should get discouraged of, this large developer already uses this marketing agent, or this large developer. It's not uncommon for me to get a call from someone who says, we normally always use such and such, but they're at capacity right now. Could you help us out for this one? So there's enough work to go around in this business, that's for sure, and more.
Absolutely. If there's any message to take away from this webinar, is that there's a lot of work in this business right now. And so, yeah, I absolutely agree. Kathy, how about you? What does FIPS do? Do you work for others? Do you work for yourself? Tell us about that model.
Sure.
FIPS clearly is a not-for-profit. So how does that enter into it as well?
Sure. So FIPS has in the past done client work for developers, ebbs and flows. At the moment, we are not doing client work at the moment, only because we have so much of our own development in-house. And in fact, I'm staffing up to meet the need in-house of what we are working on. That can change in the future, but right now I have our first project on Housing Connect 2. I created my first batch last week, very exciting. It's 249 units in the Bronx. It is a LIHTC and MIH project, 5 AMIs. So we're going to be up all night with those. I view it as really a game of chess. In the beginning, you could move a lot of people into a lot of spots, but as the game advances, you have fewer spots available and your pieces can't always move into certain spots. You want to get close to that spot. you've got some people over here, but you can't yet move them because you have to move people ahead of that piece. So, it's just sort of, you have to imagine, this crazy patchwork of things. But that's part of the challenge and the fun, actually. I had a situation just this week where I had a hearing and visual unit at 100% AMI, but I had no more applicants for that. And working with HDC and with HPD homeless group, we've actually did like a sort of a three-way juggling of units and applicants to fill multiple needs. So there's really a lot of problem solving skill that you can use in it. But going back to Phipps business, so we have a 449 unit in the Bronx. I'm finishing up another 149 unit building in the Bronx. We have a project in Far Rockaway coming up in the fall that will be 500 to 700 units over the next year, and a project in Queens about that size as well. And that's with multiple buildings and multiple TCOs. So we're very excited to do that work. In my previous role at Settlement Housing Fund, I did primarily client work on major large-scale 80/20s in Manhattan and in downtown Brooklyn area for major developers. But I also worked with developers who were coming into the program brand new. And I always say you would meet with them and they were like deer in headlights. You would start to explain the program and they would freeze. It's like, really? And some had done their research and their homework and they understood. But a lot of the job for you, if you're going to go into this business, is you're going to have to educate the developers going to come to you. You're going to have to tell them and explain to everything, because they're going to want to do certain things. They may want you to cut a corner. They may want you to move faster. And you're going to have to explain to them in a way, not that it's that you can't do it, but that it's in their best interest, and that you must do it this way, and it is in their best interest. As Nicholas was saying, for the compliance down the road, much of it is for their property management and compliance best interest down the road to do everything the absolute right way up front. But you have to educate them, because if you don't educate them, then your relationship with your client will be more difficult, because they're going to have certain expectations that you're not going to be able to meet. So you have to manage those expectations with that and develop that partnership. That's really what was spoken about earlier, of really that communication between your client and yourself with your expertise, of just keeping them informed. Problems will happen. Things will happen. You solve the problem. It's as simple as that. So that just has to be built in, and you have to tell them. And then ultimately people move into the building, and it's, amazing.
Yeah, you really need to be sort of tied at the hip with the people who are doing the development around timing and delivery and, unit occupancy. And I know, Nicholas, we talked about this because you've worked on some really complex projects that, every little delay that occurs will affect the lottery, will affect, actually having to qualify people and then re-qualify people. And the idea that, HPD qualifies people doesn't necessarily mean they're qualified when they move in or when they're ready to move in. And so, this patchwork that we're talking about here really does exist in a very, it's core to this business. And so Sharon and Nicholas, would you both sort of speak to that issue about, how those delays, how the development activity affects the lottery? Yeah, well, either one. Sharon, you could go.
It's actually one of the most critical aspects of managing the business. The schedules are everything. When will the TCO actually be achieved? Very critical, because you kind of back into the lease up based on the TCO date, right? So if you're going to be TCO'd in 6 months or 7 months, you start the pre-marketing phase, and you start advertising for the project, and you work with HPD or HDC to get the project, up on Housing Connect and into the papers. And then within that 60-day period, you start staffing up and retrofitting your leasing office, wherever you're going to do your work. And so these timelines are critical, to you from a business standpoint, because you're going to put people in place to take on, the qualification work and dealing with the applicants. And if that TCO is delayed beyond the period of time that you had initially negotiated or were told, then you're dragging out your resources. Your staffing is being dragged out. You're redoing files because they have to be eligible as of the date of move-in. So it has a big impact, financially on your business. And so, you want to build cushions into your contract to try to, alleviate that strain on yourself should the TCO be late beyond what was projected by the development or the construction, team that's working on that project.
Nicholas, you want to, yeah, go ahead.
I completely agree with what Sharon said, and again, it really goes back to the common point that I think we've all made, which is developing that honest rapport and candor with your clients, because I certainly remember on one of my first deals, which felt like a long time ago, realizing there was a big difference between TCO and actually having a building being move-in ready too. So a lot of the time, okay, you got your TCO, great, I'd walk the building. People, folks can't live here. We have to punch it out. Well, how long is it going to take to punch the units out? 6 weeks. I'm like, well, I've got folks ready to go. Paperwork, may become stale. So one takeaway that I might have for anyone listening is, to put a timeline into your contract to protect yourself with an additional fee, potentially for any paperwork that you have to redo. Because, doing this as, a small independent growing company, you've really got to protect your bottom line. So I encourage that.
Has the pandemic had any, really inordinate impact on leasing projects that you're working on now?
So one of the big things that it did is we've really pivoted towards a document collection model versus an in-person interview. And I will give credit to HDC and HPD, who were actually very prepared and really were terrific in partnering as COVID hit with their suggestions and were very flexible. But really what we're now doing is when we reach out to applicants who appear to be eligible, they're really given the opportunity to submit documents versus what we used to do was, create a schedule for appointments, and we would meet folks, over the span of 4 days, and we would, let's say, try to do 100 eligibility appointments, and then we would come back to the office with those 100 files and then start to work those in order. So just like when we met people in person, some folks are very, very organized, right? And then we all have the stories of somebody shows up for an eligibility appointment, they take out their pocketbook, dump it upside down, and they're uncrumpling, pay stubs and things like that. So it really runs the gamut. We have seen, periodic delays in actual lease signings because, because people have actually come down with COVID or, but, to the testament of everyone in this industry, we're still doing in-person lease signings. I think there's an essential nature to the work that we do. And I'm sure Kathy's team, Sharon's team, and my own, credit to them for putting on their PPE and still going to sites, signing leases, meeting with folks.
Kathy and Sharon, do you want to talk about the impact of COVID on your business?
Sure, I can address it a little bit. So Interesting, Nicholas, that you're doing in-person lease signing. We are doing those remotely by DocuSign, but they do come into the office to drop off checks. So our in-person contact is very minimal. It's unfortunate in a way. It was always nice to develop that relationship. And sometimes when you're in person, you can have a conversation and you can elicit information that when you're just collecting documents, sometimes it takes a long time. You have to play detective. And after you've gotten all the documents, now you have to ask for more because you're trying to piece it together. Whereas if you have a conversation in person, sometimes it falls into place. But on the other hand, not having those appointments, where very often people didn't show for the appointment and you had to reschedule, you gave them up to 2 weeks, they come in 2 weeks later, that really slowed down the process. So to some degree, this has actually sped it up. And we can do a telephone appointment and we can elicit that information. So I've actually rephrased and reformulated our, what we used to call the interview form to really better fit a telephone conversation. And it's easier for somebody in a way, it's less of a burden for somebody who used to have to take half a day or even a whole day off from work to come to the appointment. Sometimes I had developers who would want to set up the lease-up office near where their building was. But at Settlement Housing Fund, we were very centrally located. I said at one point, it really makes sense to have the lease-up office where we are because people can get here from any subway in the city. Whereas to get, even though they will live at that building, to get there in the middle of the day for an appointment, they take off a day from work. So not having those in-person appointments does make it less burdensome for many, many applicants. For many of the elderly or the disabled, it was hard to come in for those appointments. And so this really, as we've learned, as terrible as the situation is, there's some ways we've changed our business model, which will go forward and does have certain advantages. One of the disadvantages is that we're not really showing the apartments like we used to. We send them photographs. That's really harder. And it's harder. And I think other people are experiencing the same thing, is that we do have problems filling our highest AMI units, the 100% unit. That was even before COVID, that income bracket has more choices. So they're not necessarily, confined to a lottery. During the time of COVID, that income bracket has also taken a big hit. Without being able to see those apartments, and selling them in person does create more of a challenge, particularly for that income bracket in particular. For the lower income brackets, we have not had that issue. I mean, every so often people do turn down a unit, but that does happen. So again, the challenges of COVID, we've become more efficient in some ways.
Thanks, Kathy. Sharon, do you have any comment on this? Do you think that the innovation of telephone interviews and electronic documents is here to stay?
Actually, I do. I do. And I think that it really has allowed greater opportunity for people to, to really interface with the program. So I do. We do DocuSign as well for our lease signings. We have them mail the checks to the office. Once the check arrives, we'll send you the DocuSign and you can sign your lease. So that cuts down on, that face-to-face interaction there. We do take videos of apartments. We've staged apartments. We've put furniture into apartments using, IKEA, so people can get a real sense of what the apartments look like. And then we videotape it. And then we actually use it as a clip. We upload it so that residents or applicants can see what the units actually looks like as you walk through it. And that's been helpful as well. And that's something that's been happening on the market side, I think, for some time, where they're able to just put their buildings or their apartments on their websites. So that's been kind of something that we've done that's innovative and new for the affordable, market that we work within. So I do think it's here to stay. We offer the opportunity for people to come into the office if they're challenged from a technological standpoint. If they're unable to upload anything, they're elderly, they don't know how to do this, they don't have a computer, no one can help them. So we do offer some limited appointments for those types of households because we feel that that's important and it helps them to also be a part of the process.
Thanks, Sharon. Margie, do you want to add anything about the innovations around COVID and what's changed?
Sure, absolutely. So, one of the things that the new Housing Connect was really meant to do was to make more of the process much more remote. Housing Connect was released last July, and so COVID obviously preceded that. So we were forced to kind of rush ahead with making sure that processes could be done remotely. But now that the new Housing Connect is here, I think it really does make that so much easier for both marketing agents and for applicants. The ability to submit documents through the system, and to have information exchange and either with the applicant, marketing agent to applicant, marketing agent to HPD, is a much more efficient way to work. And so it was kind of serendipitous that that this tool was here. But I think that COVID really has helped us go even further toward that, like the video viewings of the apartments and everything. For the most part, we have gotten really positive feedback about that from applicants and from our housing ambassadors, who are a really great voice for applicants. And so we do think that it is something that is here to stay and is really just going to continue to move forward.
Yeah, that's, you know, it's constantly innovating.
Yeah.
And the Housing Connect is constantly changing. And you can see in just a few years, from mailbags to, you know, everything online, it's really, really quite amazing. So we're going to turn now to the topic of staffing. I know a lot of people online are interested in how you all manage staffing. You know, the ebb and flow of work and how that occurs for you, and how do you manage your pipeline of work. And so Sharon, do you want to start and talk about your business and how you manage the workload?
Sure. You know, for us, we're in a scale up phase right now. We started with 3 leasing agents who are well seasoned. We call them knowledge workers because they've been in the business for a while. They're heavily trained in compliance. They have certifications from various tax credit programs or through the city's programs itself. And so we started with 3 leasing agents who knew exactly what to do, how to qualify a file quickly and correctly, get it approved through the agency, and everything was fine. And then as we got new business, it became, okay, we can't stretch our staff over, you know, multiple projects without losing some you know, efficiencies and perhaps even some quality. So we've had to bring on additional leasing you know, agents who can take on new projects. And so what we kind of did for the next couple of projects is we bifurcated our staff. We have junior staff members who we call intake specialists, and so they just collect documents. They're, you know, less trained, less, you know, knowledgeable about the process, and they take the documents in, they go through the checklist, make sure everything looks good, everything has been received, and then they move it on to our seasoned staff members, our leasing agents, who then tick the file, create the, you know, the tenant income certification, make sure everything is qualified. And then we have a last step. We have a kind of assembly line. Our last step is our compliance manager. And that is the person or persons, we have 2 at this point, who are responsible for making sure that the file is absolutely ready to go to the agency, or if there's a third-party compliance agency that's a part of the process. So that way that when the file goes over to PD or HDC, there aren't many findings. We want to make sure that there's a quick turnaround. HDC says within, what, 4 to 5 days? We want it back in 4 to 5 days so that we can keep the momentum going. So we kind of created this kind of an assembly line of staffing that meets every single step of the process. And we're hopeful that we won't have to resort to layoffs at any time in the near future, that the pipeline that we're talking about today that is so full and rich and robust will continue to be so, and we can keep our staff gainfully employed. But in the event that there is, you know, an ebb in the business, you know, you want to look at areas where you can use your staff for compliance tasks through your clients. Maybe you're due annual recertifications for clients. Maybe you do auditing of files for clients, before there's an audit by the agency or the equity investor. So maybe there's other avenues you can put your staff into while you're waiting for a lease up to start, so you don't lose staff and have to retrain and retool and lose that consistency of your processes. So that's kind of how we're working our system right now. Oh, Lisa, you're muted.
Findings are like the kiss of death, right? When you get into the big black hole of findings, there are findings. I mean, and then, this is an editorial comment, all files that are approved in the Housing Connect lottery by HPD aren't always then approved by the tax credit syndicator.
At all.
And so you do all your due diligence, and then we come in and our staff come in and we find, there's a pay stub missing, or you didn't sign, you didn't sign a form, you didn't sign student status form or something like that. So, it's, I guess I would ask you all, like, when you're responding to HPD in the lottery, I mean, do you also kind of think about what the tax credit syndicator is going to expect?
You have to. Otherwise, you're going to have to perhaps, you don't want to have to touch the file too many times. You want to do it, have it approved, and really be done with it. And not have to go back and put additional documents that HDC did not request, but the equity investor is looking for, because it's what makes a complete file. So the compliance piece of our review is to ensure that even though we're not sending 6 pay stubs to the city, that we have the 6 pay stubs in the file, or the bank statements. We have all 6. So it's there, it's already packaged, and it's ready to be uploaded, and we're done with it. So it's really critical that we think about the overall compliance, because some things were actually abbreviated, so to speak, during COVID. The agency accepted less documentation than previously because of the burdens of COVID. But the equity investor, we didn't think so. We wanted to make sure that we covered all of our bases from the start, rather than them to deal with that situation down the road. Because when tenants move in, they get very less willing to provide you with documents that you need.
Yeah.
It's almost like pulling teeth. So you want to get it before they move in, have the file be complete, and not think about it afterwards.
Thank you. Nicholas or Kathy, do you want to comment?
Yeah, we're a big fan of using a third-party auditing company. I mean, I think most equity investors and syndicators now, I can't think of a deal where someone hasn't wanted that. I think the key point is that everyone wants the same thing, and that although it may seem more cumbersome that, well, the file got approved by HDC and how come Spectrum is now asking for this, or, so on and so forth, that additional work up front is going to save the headache down the road. Because I completely agree with Sharon that once you have those keys, the carrot on the end of the stick is gone. The desirable, the payoff has already been delivered. So and those third-party auditors are often not necessarily an expense that the marketing agent needs to pay for. Often the deal will pay for that expense. And they're also a sounding board for a new company or someone who's just starting out, being able to go to Spectrum and say, I have a question about this file, can you help me? Or even going to, whether it's HDC or HPD leading the process, going to them off the bat and asking them questions. Everyone wants the same desired effect here, and that it's not an adversarial one. It's really one of partnership.
Can you talk a little bit about the ebb and flow of staffing?
So one thing that I call it the farm team model, and that we always try to have a few people on the farm team. And those are people who often come in and help schedule appointments, help collect documents. And they're not necessarily looking for a career per se. Our office, our main office is based out of New Rochelle. So Monroe College is just down the road. So we often reach out to them and have a good relationship with them where they send us people. And you can quickly see the folks who have attention to detail and seem to really take pride and initiative in their work. And those are the folks that typically after about 6 months, I'm saying, offering to pay for like a NYCHM training or a Quadel training to move them into actually working files. And that's been very, very important for us. I mean, the person who now actually leads our entire team really came in as an admin for us and just, really learned the process. So always having sufficient staffing is really important, but for us, the ebb and flow, that's partially why I alluded to earlier that we often do turn down business because if I'm going to have to double my staff for one lease up, but I don't think I have work for them after, that's typically work that we will turn down.
Thank you. Kathy, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So similar to Sharon and Nicholas, certainly the model of different levels of expertise within a department is really helpful. And it's always great to grow staff. In any business, in any office, you always want to promote from within because of the technical nature of our work. As Nicholas said, you start people as an admin or as a lottery temp, and you can see right away, and you could see who really has the ability and the interest to do this. Even when you bring in temps, everyone needs a certain level of training, particularly because we deal with the public. And it is a customer service role, but the stakes are really much higher because of the fair housing issues. All you need is for one temp on the telephone to speak with somebody and not know and say, sorry, you missed your appointment, too bad. And say, oh my God, that's you've done a fair housing violation. They needed help. They had an issue. So even the temps need to have some kind of, give them your own orientation about how to speak with people, how to listen to people, because often a fair housing accommodation will come in through the phone to the first person on the line. So again, even when you use temps, you really just must train them to be sensitive and to always just ask questions, put somebody on hold, go to a manager and do that. I've been staffing up, and I've been seeing a lot of candidates who are coming from the title that I'm interviewing for is I call them compliance specialists. I'm getting a lot of people who have the title of housing specialists. The housing specialist is coming from the other side. They are the ones working on the front lines at the shelters or at other organizations, working with people trying to find affordable housing. That's a really hard job. They work so hard to get people into housing, working with a population that has so many challenges. So I've interviewed a lot of people. I've just started to hire a few people from that world. A couple of things about that group of people. Some of them are well trained in tax credit compliance. Many of them really are just used to gathering documents. So, but that's a great knowledge and understanding to start with, in that they know what we need. But again, I do know I need to train them. They're not necessarily used to doing calculations of a pay stub. They don't know how we do that. They don't know to look in the bank statements to see what we're looking at. So I know we're going to do a certain level of training, but I also know that those group of job candidates also understand the fair housing issues that we deal with. And I know they will be able to work with our applicants on that level. So if they seem to have the aptitude, I know we can train them for the technical aspect of it, whereas they do come to us with that sort of understanding of the dynamics of data, of document collection. They understand the importance of deadlines. They know that they have to comply with us. So they know when they're working on our side, how to get applicants to provide documents. So, we all look for staffing in different places. And again, we have to do different levels of training for people. And, it's not easy, but we work it out. One thing, if you are doing a major project with a very large developer, I had a developer years ago who, of course, wanted us to send out more letters. At that time, we were all doing just letters and no email. It generated huge amounts of phone calls. We actually had them lend us some of their staff to answer the phones. We knew we were going to the next month, we were going to be sending out so many more letters, making so many more appointments and answering the phones, rather than bringing in temps that we had to train who may or may not have been so interested in the work that we were doing. The developer provided us with 2 of their staff people who really understood the world better. So that's, again, part of your dialogue with your client that says, look, if you need to accelerate your timeline, or if we have some issues and we've had some timing problems, you may need to assist and provide some staffing to help in a pinch.
Thank you, Kathy. I want to leave a few minutes for questions, but first, take a minute or two, everyone, and talk about the opportunities and pitfalls of the marketing business. So Sharon, why don't you go first?
Wow, great opportunity. No question about that. It's a great business to be in. You're serving your community. You're serving your city. Pitfalls, I think, would be some of the things we already discussed. Perhaps not having enough staffing, maybe overloading your staff. I think it's important to just execute. Make sure if you've gone through the trouble of being awarded a contract, negotiating a contract, execute on that contract. Make sure that you have spent time training your staff, that your team understands what the deliverables are, what the milestones are, how many leases or you need to have executed each week, each month to hit those objectives of the leasing schedule that was discussed with you and your client. Make sure that you've developed best practices so that you can execute on your contracts and build your brand and ensure that you don't gain a reputation for not doing what you said you're going to do. So I would just underscore the fact that you have to execute on these contracts once you've been awarded them, and you do everything you need to do to make sure that happens using all the tips that we've discussed today.
Thanks, Sharon. Nicholas?
I would say that one of the things that a potential pitfall is really making sure you've got your timing very, very tight. And what I mean by that is you're querying and you're batching folks and you're giving them deadlines, really staying very tight to if the deadline passes, you're closing them out. You're dealing with appeals very timely as they come in, because as Kathy alluded to, as you sort of close buckets and you close the AMI and you have something unique, you don't want to be in a scenario where the file may be pending approval, but because you didn't deal with someone who has a lower log number, they can't, HDC or HPD can't release the approval for that file because you didn't actually address it timely. And speaking of appeals, I would say that appeals are actually your friend. In my experience, the folks who appeal are very vested and very interested in the process. And if they've taken the time to appeal, chances are they're going to be a good household and actually go all the way through the process and not flake out at the 11th hour because they've already taken the initiative to actually even just appeal.
That's great. Kathy, how about you? Opportunities and pitfalls?
Sure, but before I get to that, I just want to say actually what Nicholas said about appeals, I actually use appeals as a training tool. It's a really terrific barometer. If we got an appeal, the question is, did we make a mistake? If we did, do I need to train the staff better on this issue? Was this an unusual issue? What did we learn from this appeal? Or was this an appeal of somebody who really didn't understand things? Did we not communicate well to this person? Or was it just somebody who just likes to appeal? There's all different kinds of things. But an appeal is just not something that is a nuisance, but it is an opportunity to figure out, did something go wrong? Did it not go wrong? What could we learn from it? I have a weekly staff meeting, which I use as a training session. And I include the admins in that session because I want them to learn as well. And I'll use an appeal. I'll say, oh, that's a great case study. Let's take a look at that. Or if a staff person has a question about a file. I say, let's bring that to the whole group. Let's all learn from that. So I think really Sharon and Nicholas spoke about, the rewards, definitely, the tangible reward. You have tangibly put a household into housing that will improve their life. It's, how great is that? In the old days before COVID, I remember going and meeting people at apartments, and we would do an orientation for a large group of people who've just been given apartments, and we show them the building. And tears are coming down our eyes as we've brought them to that building. I do miss that now that we're not seeing that. Pitfalls, yes, as Nicholas says, timing is everything. And even though you might want to say, and I always have to tell my staff, we're not their caseworker. You're not helping them by extending them deadlines. It doesn't mean that we won't give them a deadline to bring in a piece of paper, a couple days later. But if they haven't given everything, we terminate them, because there is always that appeal period. We're like, okay, sometimes they'll take it more seriously. If you have terminated their file, you have 5 days now, now you're on appeal and you have a timeline. Now you're going to bring me the documents. But if you just kind of let them take another day and another day and another day, they're not taking you seriously, and they're not taking the process seriously. So those deadlines do serve a purpose, and there's always an opportunity to appeal and overturn that. So it's amazing and rewarding, and personally, again, it's challenging, but you feel good at the end of the day because you've solved problems and you've helped people. And then just an aside, to go back to something, even though I do in-house work right now, I still have clients. The clients are the developers at FIPS who have built the buildings and have to answer to the tax credit investor. I do a monthly report to our tax credit investor. I do a weekly dashboard, a very thorough dashboard to our in-house developer. So there is accountability everywhere, even if it's in-house. And that accountability is really helpful also for me to manage the business. So I encourage all of you, if your client has not asked for reporting, create your own tracking. Do all kinds of tracking. How many applicants are in process? How many applicants are under the appeal timeframe? How many applicants have you sent notices, and are you waiting for documents? Do a weekly dashboard for yourself, even if your client hasn't asked for it. And that way you could track trends and you can get a sense of workload. How many files do each of your specialists have? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, reputation is everything in this business, both, on HPD side and on the syndicator side, everywhere. If you perform and can deliver qualified tax credit tenants in a timely way, you're going to be a desirable marketing firm, right? So for everyone on this everyone in this webinar, that's your goal, to be able to deliver, to be able not to overpromise, really to be able to do the work in the time that's allotted to get the work done. And for those of you who are in the training program, or who, just want to put your toe in the water here, I hope that you really take to heart everything our panelists have said today. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ibrahima, who's been monitoring questions in the chat. Ibrahima, do you want to tell us some questions?
Sure. Absolutely. I have quite a handful of questions here, and I want to be mindful of the time as well, that we're slated to end by 11. So first question here, any of the panelists can jump in or chime in. How can we quickly educate ourselves in order to be consultative resources to developers?
Did everybody get that? Do you want to repeat? There's some static in your microphone. Would you repeat that?
Let's try that again. Is it still staticky?
Yeah, very staticky.
So I think what I'll do.
Do you want me to just, this was from the chat, right? Oh, the question was, how can we quickly educate ourselves in order to be a consultative resource to the developer? So does somebody want to field that question? How can we quickly educate ourselves in order to be a consultative resource to the developer?
Sure, so I'll jump in here for a second. I mean, certainly, first taking a look at the RFQ that is currently out really gives a good idea of the expertise that is needed in order to do marketing work. The key components are LIHTC compliance training, so you really know what it takes to build a qualified file, the requirements for somebody to qualify for affordable housing. Fair housing training is really essential. And then also, we have a in-house training that we offer for free. It is part of the Pathways to Opportunity, but we also offer that separately. And that is really a very technical training on how to do a housing lottery, how to understand Housing Connect, and particularly the new Housing Connect process. Those are three really key areas of knowledge in order to really start anything in the Housing Connect process.
There's another question regarding staffing that panelists addressed. How does working remotely impact your staffing training management?
I'll address it. So, again, you just have to learn to pivot. Now we have weekly staff meetings on Microsoft Teams, and I've learned also you could share your screen. So, it took a long time to get away from that physical file. The staff person would have a question, they'd come, we'd open the file, we'd touch every pay stub. So you have to just change. And now you realize that you can upload it on the screen and you could show everybody together and you could look at the same document by sharing the screen, and you could walk through the same issue. So it hasn't affected it in a negative way by doing it remotely. It's a little more awkward when you bring new people in. When I bring new people in, my office is working at 50% capacity so that we don't have too many people in the space physically at one time. But my space is quite large at the moment and I have a lot of empty desks. So when I have a new person, I try to have them in the office every day for the week, and they overlap with different staff people so that you can develop more of a rapport one-on-one in person, and then they could move remote and we can work that way. So
thank you, Kathy. There's a great question. Do you find developers attempt to pay well below what you propose? Does HPD, HDC allow contracts that do not meet a responsible price?
Developers are typically good at what they do for a reason. Developers are negotiators. So, I think you really do need to stick to your guns though for pricing, because if you try to do this endeavor really as a loss leader, if you don't have, enough backing, I think you're going to struggle. I can't speak to whether or not, HPD and HDC allow, if they have a threshold, because I don't know whether or not they actually specifically ask to see contracts. I know there are underwriting standards for marketing expenses, but I think you really need to stand firm when you're negotiating price.
Absolutely.
Does anyone else want to comment on that?
Just
in a
to
minute.
piggyback what Nicholas said, it's critical that you look at the price point vis-a-vis what your staffing needs are, and what your overhead is, and profit. If you want to make some profit, and you are able to negotiate beyond what the pro forma agreement states as the marketing, per unit cost, you can get a premium on that number depending on the complexity of the lease up. If it's a straight, 60%, 40%, 30% AMI mix, maybe the $1,500 a unit or $1,800 a unit is adequate. But if you're going into the 110s, you're at 90%. There's a complexity there that's beyond just the lottery, and so you are able to command a higher per unit fee. And as Nicholas said, don't be afraid to state what you need to make it successful. Because if you don't speak up front, it's very hard to come at the end of the contract or at some point in the middle to say, you know what, I underpriced this. I really need more money. It doesn't go over very well. So it's important to understand that.
Thank you. It's 11:59. And so there are still questions in the chat. And I think that maybe we'll just compile the questions in the chat and share them with our panelists and try to circulate them. I think we can probably do that. So all registrants will receive a link to replaying the webinar, so you'll be able to hear this again. We're gonna do another spring webinar for those people who are in the next round of our Pathways to Opportunity program. And so from the team at LISC, NEF, Enterprise, and HPD, I thank everyone for being here, and thank you panelists so much for your contribution. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to add my thanks. This was really terrific. I hope this was helpful to the audience, but I know I got a lot out of it. So we really appreciate it.
And this is Anne Marie Hendrickson from HPD. I wanted to say thank you so much to the panelists. This was very great. It was informative. Lisa, Margie, you guys did a great job moderating. Panelists, you did a marvelous job. And there are really good questions in that chat. So we do really need to answer them. And I appreciate people asking about pricing, because I think people do think HPD and HDC, I mean, Margie, we can speak for ourselves. We don't really review pricing in that way. So I think the panelists say it well in terms of make sure you account for what you really need to do the job in a really expert way. So thanks again, everybody. This was really great. LISC, you did a great job putting this on. Appreciate the help all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Anne Marie. Anne Marie is really the heading up this whole training enterprise here. So we greatly appreciate your guidance and support around this project. So with that, I think we're going to sign off now. Thank you all and have a great day. Keep training.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.